Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 397. The end of 2021 is almost here, which means now is the time to look back at the movies and moments that shaped the past year in cinema. Joining me now to talk about the horror movie genre in 2021, it's Lance Vlcek, film critic, video editor, and content creator for horror movie website Arrow in the Head, which is part of the Joe Blow network. Lance, I thank you so very much for joining me today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, my friend. I think this is really cool of you. I'm glad we actually got to get together and do this.
So do I. I mean, I'm a big fan of Arrow in the Head, the stuff today. I know John Fallon, who pretty much founded Arrow in the Head, and always into the content. I love watching your videos because you talk about horror movies that are near and dear to my heart. Movies like Warlock Part 2 and different Hellraiser sequels, etc. Good Van Damme B trash movies as well, like Cyborg, etc. So that was this is one of my people. So I had to have you on the show and talk about horror movies. And it's been an interesting 2021 because it was kind of almost like the comeback year really for movies in a lot of ways. Because 2020, of course, has just shut everything down worldwide, both with you in the States and myself in Australia. Horror movies is that genre, though. It's and not to be, demeaning at all to the genre at all, the filmmakers of it, but it's kind of like the cockroach of film genres. You could drop a nuclear bomb in it and it will still survive and thrive because it's just one of those genres that just really sticks it out. And I think in many ways, 2021, the horror movie genre is what kind of dominated more than anything else. You could say superhero movies, but it didn't really have the same kind of panache that it had in previous years. And I sent you the top 5 box office draws of worldwide grossing for horror movies. So let's just go through that real quick. We have A Quiet Place at number 1 at 297 million. Second was The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It at 201 million. And then you have Halloween Kills at 131 million. Old at 90 million, and then Candyman at 77 million. And it's, considering that a lot of people, a lot of these movies were out on, digital, if not on the same day, then maybe a month after, in that a lot of people were hesitant to go back into cinemas. It's quite impressive numbers for horror movies, don't you think?
I completely agree. I actually wanted to comment on what you said earlier about, how horror always survives, because I think this was the year, besides Spider-Man and maybe one or two others, it's horror saved the theaters. It, like you point out right here, people went back for horror over anything else. And I honestly think a lot of that has to do with the fact that as much as there's that perceived trashiness of it, it's not usually not nominated for awards. It's never been giving the accolades, but it makes money and it's consistent always. The Western has gone away. The musical is dead. But horror, I don't care who you are, every decade it grows and changes. I think it's the most consistent genre. And looking at this list, it's pretty impressive. I'd say there's 3 sequels, 1 original, and then 1 quasi remake. That ain't bad. I got to be honest. I thought it was a weird year because I would probably say personally the best horror movies I saw. I'm actually putting a list together for work. Were mostly smaller affairs, but I guess at the same time, that's usually how it always is. But even this list, it's pretty surprising. The Conjuring, is on there. I didn't think that would do anything for being such a later sequel. Old is pretty impressive to me that actually is number 4. Candyman, did better than I thought it would do. But yeah, people went, man. People went. I got to be honest. I only went to theaters twice this year, and they were both for movies on this list. And that should say something,
Well, I've been to the theaters, the cinemas a bunch of times, but mostly in the last couple of months, because here in Australia, we had kind of a real, in New South Wales especially, we had a big push for vaccinations, et cetera, to open stuff up. So, but the majority of the films that I saw here, I'd say 3 of the 5 I saw in cinemas, which was Quiet Place, Conjuring, Old. But pretty much every horror movie that I saw this year was in streaming, which is like a really interesting thing that I want to touch on a little later as well. But first, I just want to talk about A Quiet Place Part 2, because this was kind of like the first big test, like post-pandemic. The movie came out like in March of this year. It was supposed to come out in 2020, got pushed back again and again and again and again. Paramount, I'm sure, were eyeing that, the opening of their streaming network and kind of like how to kind of link the two together. And when it came out in the cinemas, people, actually went, 297 million. I think like overall worldwide box office is like top 20, which is pretty impressive in its own, considering it's a horror movie. I loved the first A Quiet Place movie, and the second one I liked as well. I think John Krasinski really kind of showed some real chops there, especially in that opening sequence, was just something else. And for people out there who haven't seen it, buckle your seatbelts, because that opening like 10, 15 minutes, something else. What did you think of the sequel? And what did you think of the fact that this was kind of like the movie that kind of like, put its foot into the deep end post-pandemic?
Well, I will say I'm impressed that this did as well as it did. This was actually the first movie that I was going to see as a film critic in theaters. Because when I officially did like the critic role, it was honestly, this was the movie. This was the first movie. Then I don't know, maybe 2 days before I was going to go see this, the world shut down, and so I had to wait. I would say the first one is actually one of the better movies I've seen in years. All sound design, a great thriller. I like it. Krasinski. I'm the kind of guy that I usually don't judge a book by its cover, but I didn't think he would be as good as he was as a director and writing a horror film as that was. I thought the sequel was good. I got to be honest. The first one to me is such a perfect singular story. I didn't want it to continue, but I'm also kind of cynical when it comes to things like this. I'm so bloated with everything having more that I always want a single story. I'm the kind of guy that, to tie this in, I watched the first season of Stranger Things and I loved it. And I refused to watch anything more because I was like, that's my story. I'm done. I don't want to watch it anymore. So I thought Quiet Place Part 2 was good. I didn't think it was good as the first. That being said, I do think it's awesome that a newer movie that isn't already a known IP had a sequel that is the top grossing horror film. I think that's cool. And honestly, even if it wasn't as good as the first, I still support Krasinski. And I think, hey, fuck it, man, let's do it. Like, do more horror. I hope that he does more different stories. Of course, I don't want A Quiet Place 4 and 5 personally. I don't need everything to be a franchise, but the fact that this is a new IP and did this well, I think is kind of, it gives me a bit of hope, like it's not Halloween. It's not Candyman. It's not something that has been around for most of my life. So the fact that he could pull that off, man, I'm down. I didn't see it in theaters. I actually saw it on Blu-ray or streaming, or which one? I don't know. I watched it on my TV, and I got to be honest, the experience is perfect for me. I turned it loud as hell. I don't know how this would be in theaters, because I feel like if somebody was eating popcorn or drinking, I might be upset, because it's all sound design. All this is mix,
Very true. I mean, having watched it in a big screen, that first 10, 15 minutes especially it was kind of like a jolt to the system, because I was so used to watching stuff on a small screen for so long. When I watched that film, I was like, oh God.
You're talking about the prequel part, right? That was the best part of the movie. It's setting off everything. Yeah, it
really is. And like I saw it as later on like this small screen streaming as well, because my wife couldn't go to the screening, but she liked the first film. She wanted to watch it, so I watched it again. And having seen her reaction to it, it still worked into like in a more kind of like intimate setting. But then that was just a great jolt to the system. It's kind of like almost like an adrenaline shot, just in that prequel sequence in that film especially. It's really interesting about that movie. It's very, very much shaping into become a franchise. I think Jeff Nichols was attached for quite a while to be like a director for like a spin-off from the movie of the franchise as well. I think they're going to work on the third one with numbers like that. You can definitely see why. But let's just moving on now to another like set franchise, which is the Conjuring franchise. Now, this has to be one of the most disappointing movies for me of the year. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Look, it's horror movies. What's so cool about them is filmmakers can make them at a real kind of like budget, stuff. Look at the whole kind of Blumhouse kind of like model. They're making films for like a set budget, and they can make their budget's 5 times over in box office receipts.
Yeah, they always make money. It's perfect.
Always make money. The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It. It cost only like 30-something mil, and it made 201 worldwide, Yeah. And so maybe this question I'm going to pose is going to seem rather arrogant on my part, but to me, it feels like even though the box office receipts are there as a creative enterprise, it feels like the franchise is really running out of steam for me. And the reason I say that is when I watched that first movie, that first Conjuring movie, to me, it was like almost like a glorious kind of throwback to these films of the 1970s. Amityville Horror was a specific one. This kind of like really kind of set, smaller horror movies, family based, not made for families, but family based. Always a family at the center of it, kind of based on the true story. I love when horror movies do that. They say it's based on true story, but they put the flourishes on it. But it's got these really kind of innovative kind of set pieces to it and scares to it that James Wan did such a great job with in that first movie. And by the time I got to The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It, we've had a couple of sequels, we've had spin-offs, we had prequels, we had this and that. And there's a formula to these films and that kind of like quiet, bang, jump scare kind of stuff. And I think we've been seeing so many of these films now, and I'm so attuned to it. And the whole based on the Warrens kind of thing, which I like even look. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic horror film. Even I could smell the bullshit from a mile away when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? And they really pushed it to the limit a little too much with this film. It's like, I don't buy it. Where in the first Conjuring, you don't need to buy it, but it's such a small film, you can kind of get into the vibe of it. By the time I saw this movie, they jumped the shark big time, I think, with this film. And yeah, it made money. I just don't think that people kind of like it has the same impact that it does anymore. That was my rant about it anyway. What about yourself? What did you think of the whole film?
So we're actually very similar in this. So here, I actually really enjoyed the first Conjuring because I look at that as every generation, or not every generation, every decade, let's say, 90s, 80s, 2000s, 2010s, yada, yada, has, I think, a movie that kind of shapes something. Like the ghost story for most of the 2000s was lame. I think, personally, the early 2000s, I think, were a really dark time. But The Conjuring, and I guess on another level, you could say Paranormal Activity, kind of did their own thing. They kind of reinvented it in a modern way. And The Conjuring was cool, man. It was jump scare heavy, but it had atmosphere. It had a good look. Wan's an energetic director. And I was like, this is cool. It's not something I need 20 of, but I'm down. Let's do this. At least it's something. But it's like they made it the Marvel of horror. And so it's so, like you said, so formulaic. At this point, I don't care. And the fact that it makes money makes me sad, but it's like, this is how life is now. It's either an indie movie that is amazing, that makes, a couple million, or you got a franchise that makes, there's no more $40 million movie. And so The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It. I saw it. I thought it was lame, but I also thought The Nun was lame. I thought Annabelle Creation, besides the girl, I can't think of her name. She's blonde. She was in a couple things, Hunting Hill House. She's an amazing actress. That doesn't matter.
I'll look it up in mine. Go ahead.
But besides that, I think it's like you said, it's formulaic. Like they got it down to a science. And once you have a science in horror, it's boring. Like, again, I should also admit, I love schlocky sequels from the 80s. So I love all the Jasons, all the Freddys, and that had that same formulaic thing. But I would also argue those had a bit of creativity and heart, even if they were pumped out by a studio, where now I do think there's too many hands in the shit. Yeah, it's not The Devil That Made Me Do It. It might be a fun sequel if people are getting their heads ripped off and things are exploding. But like you said, it's they've taken these two characters and run them into the ground, and it's just not my thing. I think it's maybe making money because it's great for 16 and 18-year-olds. Maybe it could be that audience. I don't know who's seeing this.
Yeah,
none of my friends love it. Again, the first one was good. The second was fine, but it's formulaic, man. It's generic. I don't know. I've never really things like this. It's like you got one or two and then move on. I just don't like that everything is 40 movies. I really don't.
Yeah. I mean, you and I imagine you and I kind of like similar in the same age. And, growing up myself as a child of the 80s, that kind of franchise like Overkill is just part and parcel of the horror genre, isn't it? Like there's 8 Freddy's, there's how many Friday the 13th, Halloween, is something that came out this year, and in Halloween Kills, that's like, I don't know, one number in the series of stuff. I think it's just part of the horror kind of experience, isn't it? Where they kind of get that one idea, they water it down as much as they can, but people go and watch it because those films like that, that's the reason why they call it a franchise film. It's kind of like McDonald's, sometimes you just want to have that chicken nugget and chips, right? And it's not safe, good. It's cheap. It's easy to get. It's accessible. It's not good for you. You're not going to feel good afterwards, but it's there for the moment. Just in regards to Annabelle Comes Home, the 2 stars from that was McKenna Grace, who was in the Ghostbusters movie this year, and Madison Eisman. She played the babysitter, the blonde. She was in the Jumanji movies and Goosebumps movies as well, and Modern Family. So those might be the actresses that you're talking about there. Let's move on now to another film, really a film that kind of divided opinion, and that's M. Night Shyamalan's Old. I'm the kind of guy that I love The Sixth Sense and Signs and Unbreakable to such a degree that whenever an M. Night Shyamalan film to come out, even though it goes against my most primal base, judgments, I will give it a shot and I'll see if the guy still has the magic again, which in my opinion with Old kind of like says he does not. Like I said, number 4 in a worldwide box office in horror films in regards to horror films at 90 million. Critically speaking, this was a film that really kind of like divided opinion right down the middle. I mean, if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it sits right at 50%. And if you look also at the audience reaction score, which is kind of like, depending on what type of film we're talking about, this one sits right at 53% in regards to audience reaction as well. So we have a large sample size here that says that some people really dug it, some people did not. I was in, the did not camp. I think a lot of that has to do with just like, M. Night Shyamalan as a filmmaker. Sometimes, he can just. This isn't based on a original story. This is based on a graphic novel, a French graphic novel from what I know of, called Sandcastle. But he can come up with he's an ideas man to me. He can come up with the greatest ideas, but he just doesn't know how to flesh them out. And I think the big problem with it is story structure and the clunkiness. And then that kind of just snowballs into, how he kind of gets his performance to do stuff. This is really great cast. You've got Gael Garcia Bernal and Nat Wolff and Rufus Sewell. Sorry, Alex Wolff, I say. Thomason McKenzie, who's one of my favorite young upcoming actors working today, and not one of them do a good job in this film. And I think a lot of it comes down to the screenplay and the direction that M. Night Shyamalan has. But people went to see it because I think he's just one of those kind of names, that people kind of like attach those big films to. He's got lore behind him, but that doesn't necessarily translate to good movies. Where did you stand? Kind of like the old kind of like thing. Were you with the good camp or the bad camp?
Well, let me say this. You and me are very close on this when it comes to, I was in theaters for Sixth Sense. I was in theaters for Unbreakable. I was in theaters for Signs. And I will admit that is his trifecta, even though the ending of Signs I have issues with, but whatever. Unbreakable is one of those I loved when it came out. I love it more now. I think it's one of the better superhero movies, especially how low key he plays it. And you're right. I think it's I don't know what it is. I always think about this because what was it about him in the early 2000s or 1999 and on that is not here now? Because Old, I thought was okay. I didn't hate as much as other people. I thought it had moments I liked. The ending was, he can't do an ending. I think his dialogue at this point is atrocious. Like you said, the actors are all great, but the dialogue is so, I don't know what it is. I think it's campy, but it's also, it's over explaining it. There's a word for that.
A lot of exposition to it.
Yeah, it's all exposition. That the whole movie was people saying things out loud. I'm like, man, if you would just cut half the dialogue and just go with acting, but they kept saying everything. That was my problem with it's such a cool concept. People essentially aging a whole lifetime in a day, but they're saying everything that's happening out loud. And I was like, man, you're ruining it. Yeah. And he's a good director. I honestly think he should not touch scripts. And I'm not being rude. I'm not a writer, so who am I? But I think in terms of cam work, direction, style, I like him. I just don't think he should be involved in the other process because clearly there's a disconnect. I saw it. It was the first one I actually got to see in theaters as a critic. So I got to go to like a critic screening, and people seemed to like it a lot more than I did. I walked out with like 40 questions. Like, okay, well now this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. But I'm the same way though. I had this little bit of hope. I'm like, okay, maybe he's going to come back one day because I do think he's talented. I don't think he should write. I think that's it. I mean, I know he didn't write this one, but he really did. He took a concept and he wrote the screenplay. Yeah. He should have had somebody else do the screenplay. Just be the director. I think that would be his best bet. I'm rooting for him because he seems like a good guy. I'm not going to pile on, I want him to do well. Is that weird and optimistic?
No, I'm exactly the same. I'm the kind of guy that holds out hope that his next, whatever movies it is, I'm going to continue to watch it because having the experience of seeing, like, he's kind of like, watching like a basketball player who you've seen him score 50, right? But then he has a bunch of single digit games and he's shooting 25%. It's kind of like watching Russell. I don't know if you follow basketball, but it's kind of like watching Russell Westbrook at the moment with the Lakers, right? He's an MVP caliber player, and you know that when he's on his strengths, when he's on his game, that he's going to give you something magnificent. But when the weaknesses take over and the weaknesses are glaring, he's going to have so many dud games. He kind of mars the legacy of what came beforehand. So I'm the same. I would love to see in the credits for M. Night Shyamalan more story by M. Night Shyamalan in screenplay.
Yeah, concept. Like you're right.
Exactly. I'm the same here.
Yeah, I hope he has it. I mean, before we jump on, I will say that I thought The Visit was good, and I dug.
I like Split.
Which was Split the third one, or what was the second one? I can't think. I'm so bad at names.
In regards to his whole,
there's Unbreakable. There's one in the middle, then there's the third one. I can't. Is Split the third, or is
from one?
Glass is the third. Split is the second, right? In the trilogy.
Yes, that's right.
Split I liked. Glass I didn't.
Yes,
Glass
that's right.
Kind of lame.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I mean, you have in that trilogy itself. I think it just speaks to what his career as a whole, as a kind of creative guy. Unbreakable was kind of like this really kind of interesting. Kind of like film that he had that delved into this kind of like different world, but he had these kind of like filmmaking talent there, and it kind of worked, and it became this cult hit. And then Split, which was like this really kind of almost like a comeback thing for him because he had The Visit before that, but Split was the one that really kind of made people go, oh yeah, this is the guy to remember. Yeah. And then he follows that the exact same cast, the exact same concept, the exact same, he's the guy who's creative force, and Glass is like plummeted. And I think a lot of people held hope that Glass would be like, the next step forward for him. And it just
return.
Exactly. And it just went 5 steps back. Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad saying this, but Bruce Willis has given up on life and he shouldn't be cast in movies. And that was the one where I'm like, okay, Bruce Willis, I know you've come out and said you hate action movies. You hate them. This is not action. So if you truly care about acting and it's just, you don't want to hold a gun anymore, then Glass should be his best performance. And he showed up half asleep and he didn't give a shit. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I love this guy back in the 90s and 80s, but Bruce Willis seems to go away now. It breaks my heart to say that.
I think that's definitely has to be a video that you need to put together for Joe Blow, because that is such an interesting, like, just to go off the beaten path here. I mean, the whole kind of thing just, like myself, I'm sure you get a lot of emails from distributors, etc. And whenever I get one for like the next Bruce Willis film, it looks like the last 5 Bruce Willis films. Like it looks like the same concept art, the same type of character, the same kind of like beady-eyed kind of Bruce Willis on the cover. It doesn't look any different to the previous one, And I myself was hoping Glass would be kind of like a bit of a shot to the system for him, but it clearly wasn't. I mean. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on there either, which is a shame because there was once upon a time when the guy was working with interesting filmmakers.
He's I think a good actor. Yeah,
he is a very good actor, but I don't know. Something's going on there, which is like really, really odd. One day we're going to see a documentary or a film made about that man's later half of career because it's something else.
Well, there's I watched a video. I wish I could quote the guy who did it. I don't know who it was, but they kind of pieced something together. Like, okay, he has this contract where like he only works for like 3 days. And I'm don't give me I'm not being very specific because I'm kind of paraphrasing a video I watched like a month ago. But the video basically said he works for a couple days. His contract says, okay, you hire me, you put me on the cover. I'm Bruce Willis. I'll make you some money overseas. Yeah. I show up for 2 days on set. Anytime it's not my face, you're using my body double. So anytime it's any side or back shot that you can't see his eyes, it's a body double. He tends to sit down a lot. So I think he's pulling a late stage Seagal where it's like, I'm just going to use my name, work a couple days a week, make millions. I think it's kind of like I shouldn't say scheme, but let's just say allegedly a scheme. Kind of like how Adam Sandler seems to always make movies in Hawaii with like his 10 best friends, and it's very cheap, but he gets a free vacation, allegedly. Mm-hmm. I think Bruce Willis is on that path right now where it's like he has 15 years left of life, 20 maybe. So he's just this is basically him retired. I don't think he wants to act. I think he does this for the paycheck because he was kicked off of Expendables 3 for requesting like a crap ton of money for being in like 10 minutes. And Stallone's like, we'll get your ass out of here. Stallone, on the other hand, is, like I said, we grew up in the same era. I love Stallone. He's still hustling. Even if he makes a bad movie now or then, he cares. And yes. I love that, So rant over. I'm sorry.
No, I think that Expendables 3 thing says everything because he did ask for a huge amount of money from supposedly one of his best mates who's also producer in the film for minimal impact. And Stallone was really kind of cool about it. He's like, oh, it's okay. I'll get Harrison Ford.
Exactly. Yeah, Stallone's the man. Good for him.
He is. He definitely is. Let's talk about, I mentioned at the start of our conversation in regards to horror movies and just its ability to survive. Whatever the trends are, whether they be technological, whether they be, pandemic induced, like we've seen in the last couple of years, it's always there. And I think the big thing about this past couple of years, it was people really hardcore flocking into the streaming services. I mean, people were watching streaming stuff. And Netflix and chill didn't come out from nowhere, right? People are already doing this. But when you have no other option, that's when a lot of kind of like different, organizations in such like a Paramount Network or Disney Plus really said, okay, we've got to get our shit together now, get all our content out now. And I think a streaming service that did a really, really good job with that was Shudder. People who don't know, Shudder is kind of like their premier kind of like horror movie streaming service. They've got original films, they've got classic films. They've merged off into like TV stuff now, or TV as in, serial, and then also, documentary, etc. Shudder became available here in Australia, I think it was early last year, maybe a little bit the year before. So it's now a worldwide thing. And, you both of us are writing our end of year lists. I'm writing on my, horror movie list as well. I'm going to just say at the top of my head, maybe 60 to 70% of the titles there have premiered on Shudder because the content there is just really strong. I think it's really they've really established themselves really well as kind of like the kind of place to go to see horror content. And they've done it at the exact right time because that's where people are going to watch this stuff, and their subscription numbers have gone like way, way higher because of it. What's your take on the whole kind of the Shudder thing?
I love them more than life itself. I've always wanted a horror streaming service. I think it was Channel Zero. There's somebody who did it before, but they didn't do it well. They slipped up. And then Shudder came around. I've been a subscriber for at least 2 or 3 years now. I did it for Joe Bob because I grew up on Monster Vision TNT. I love that man. He was like my horror host. I mean, I guess Sven Gulli was around as well since I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. But I love Shudder, man. I love it. I think they're consistent. They put out good stuff. I know they're not necessarily independent, but they're not crazy big. So there's a sense of I'm supporting people when I signed for Shudder. Plus, it gave Greg Nicotero the money to make the Creepshow TV series, which is schlocky and fun and amazing, and just reminds me of the old Tales from the Crypt kind of stuff. Right. I love it, man. I mean, they even brought Elvira back for, I think, her 40-year anniversary. So I will support Shudder for the rest of my life until they go away. Any place that gives Joe Bob, any place that gives Elvira room to grow. And like you said, a lot of the originals. So I have a hard time knowing what's exactly on Shudder because a lot of times I'll watch a screener and then I realize, it's a Shudder exclusive. So like I don't always see it in the same order, but everything they do, I agree with. I should say that. I'm going to just be a whore and say that whatever they do, I'm down. They've proven themselves to be actual fans, and I'm a man that supports anything that's good.
You got to love the business model as well. It's not only just about the budgets, it's not only about, choosing the correct content. It's about certain philosophies in regards to as well, like practical effects, for example.
Yes.
For growing up watching like, the John Carpenter films, etc., having that kind of like embedded in you. Like I'm not down on CGI per se. Like I watch so many films and I'm sure CGI play a big part in the creation of them, and they looks great, etc. It's something about the kind of practical effects part of it, the kind of like creature feature makeup stuff that I just absolutely love. I love the craft of it. I like the application of it. Sometimes it might not look the most convincing, but once in a while, taking a peek behind the curtain, seeing how Oz works, it's an interesting thing for me. And I think the way
it's there on screen,
exactly.
That's what I like. Like I'm with you. Whether it looks great or not, something about being lit, blocked, and filmed. Because CGI 10 years later, 5 years later, always looks like shit. Besides Jurassic Park, nothing holds up. Maybe I guess Terminator 2. But practical there's something to it. And it could be that we're nostalgic. I'll be honest. I don't know if my little brother is going to have the same view on it, but we grew up in a time where people didn't make things and create them. And I think when you render something, the little bit of soul's lost. I do. I'm not saying it can't be good. I mean, doesn't David Fincher use a shit ton of CGI, but it's always a tree or a sky or like a building. Like that's a CGI that I love, where it expands something, but I don't notice it. But when it's a monster, it's always lame. It's always lame. I'm going to say that right now.
Because it's true. I mean, when that Spider-Man film came out, No Way Home, I did a kind of like went back and watched kind of like the Tobey Maguire, even some of the Andrew Garfield one, because my kids love Spider-Man, so I went back and watched the old ones. And you're just like, whew, I don't remember looking at so cartoonish, that CGI, when I watched it in cinemas back in 2002.
No, it looked good, but yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, it's like you appreciate the work put into it, you appreciate the craft put into it, but there's a certain it doesn't hold up to the ravages of time. It really doesn't. Whereas when I watch kind of like The Thing or Pumpkinhead or something like that, you're just like, wow, you're just watching. It's almost, to me, it's like great artistry when you watch someone like a Stan Winston do his stuff or whoever. I just love watching that stuff, and I watch it come to life. And I think Shudder really do a good job in kind of like keeping that flame alive. They do it with respectable budgets. They create great films. They have films that can sometimes really push the boundaries, but that's what horror is about sometimes. And I just really dig what they've been doing. And like I said, a lot of their films are showing up in my final top 10 for 2021 in my favorite horror movies. Let's talk about. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, can you name a couple off of Shudder? Because I feel embarrassed. I don't know specifically what's a Shudder original and what's not. Like VHS 94 was on Shudder. That was really fun.
I like the Boy Behind the Door. I thought that was a pretty good film that came out a couple months ago.
I never saw it. Everybody says it was good. It passed me up. It's one of those things, but I have heard good things about that.
That's a good one. Jacob's Wife, I thought, Barbara Cranston in that film was really good as well.
Oh yes, I agree. Yeah. That was a Shudder. Okay, yeah, that was her career-defining performance. I loved it. She had so much scenery to show. It was great.
I don't have my list in front of me though, but there's a whole bunch of them.
No, okay. Yeah.
And I really like the kind of like the stuff they did with their kind of document. They had a kind of like whole documentary series on like what was it? Anyway, I can't think of the top of my head, but I had like a whole documentary series kind of like based on different genres of horror movies as well. I really enjoyed that.
There's the Cursed one too that went on which I thought was respectable. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was an original, but I did watch that Exorcist documentary that based on. It was called Leap of Faith, and there was like a whole kind of like, it was like a long form interview with William Friedkin, and that was pretty good too, because I'm a huge Exorcist fan. I'm not sure if that was a Shudder original though, but I did have it come from the Shudder marketing team to me. It could have been like a premiere exclusive to like my territory. That was a really good film as well.
I like Friedkin. Every time I watch an interview with him, he's so brutally honest that it brings me a lot of joy, because he's old school and nobody would talk like that.
Oh man, did you see it was from a few years back when he was doing it? It was like Nicholas Winding Refn from Drive, and Only God Forgives was interviewing him, and they were talking about their films and the kind of like, and they'll talk about the notion of masterpiece. And Nicholas Winding Refn says, I made Only God Forgives, and that was a masterpiece, and no one watched it. And Friedkin said, whoa, can we hold up? Can someone just check this guy for if he's drunk right now? Did you say that piece of shit was a masterpiece? He said it straight to his face. He knows he's the guy who made it, And Winding Refn's like, yeah. It's like, no, Citizen Kane is a masterpiece. Your film wasn't nothing like a masterpiece, And You gotta love it. It's just like zero fucks given kind of like attitude to life.
Not even being nice. Just
No.
yeah. He's gonna walk away and never see the guy again. Yeah.
No, the dude survived, all types of the, addictions and studio interference over the decades. Like he's a grizzled vet. He's not gonna tolerate anything anymore. I can't wait to see him do something again, but I don't know when that's gonna happen. Probably not.
I mean, I not to sound cynical. I hope he does. I hope he doesn't, because I feel like the artistry that guy came from isn't around, and they would nickel and dime him. I don't know if they even get the freedom. The Exorcist and Rampage, which are the two of the movies that screwed me up as a kid. I didn't get it. Oh yeah, I like just a guy randomly killing people as like a little kid. That messed me up as much. And then The Exorcist. So as far as I'm concerned, that guy's a king. I even like The Guardian, and that's just a really stupid tree movie, but I don't know. I like the guy. I think Friedkin's one of the better directors of our generation, and I'm glad that he got to do it during that time. Anybody comes out now,
Yeah, I did a whole. I do kind of like monthly kind of director spotlights on I look at certain films. I do a top 10, and I did Freakin' was one of my last ones. And Rampage was like my top 10 of his movies. That's a movie that deserves to have a bit of a remaster and a re-release, because I don't even know if you can find it anywhere. I think I found it on YouTube somewhere.
I grew up on the VHS. I don't think I ever saw it on DVD. I know there's like two different cuts. I've only seen whatever the one that was in the video stores, but it got to me. And again, what scares people is obviously so subjective. But to me, I just love the fact that the guy just goes and kills a kid, kills a mom, kills a dad, and it's just so cold. And plus, Michael Biehn. I mean, let's not forget about him. I'm any spotlight you could shine Rampage makes me happy, because I think that's one of those films that will end up lost to time. I don't see them doing a remaster. I hope they do, but I don't know. I get worried. It hasn't been on Blu-ray. I don't think it was on DVD. What's the chance of being on 4K? It could be one of those just lost movies.
Lost to time. There's a lot of them. I
know. Yeah. It breaks my heart. That's why I'm such a big physical media guy.
Yes, me too.
If you don't own it, man, it doesn't exist.
Exactly. I mean, you one day you could be watching Prince of Darkness on the streaming network, and then the next month it's gone. And that's why I got the Blu-ray.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I watched over the pandemic. I watched Community for the first time, and then like a week later, they removed like 2 episodes. I'm like, I would have never known. So you never know. I don't know, but that's a different argument for a different day.
Let's talk about 2022. Horror releases, any anticipated titles that you have there. It's going to be another, interesting year. I think it's going to be one of those years again where we're going to see like a domination kind of like on the streaming services in regards to, but having looked at kind of like some of the movies that are out, there's some films I didn't even know they were making. Like for example, there's going to be a new Evil Dead movie called Evil Dead Rise, which is releasing in October. There's a new Salem Slot that they're making as well. I mean, talk about films when you watch it as a kid that kind of fuck you up. That's one of them right there.
That's like vampires, yeah.
Yeah, the one that I'm most looking forward to is The Black Phone, which is the latest film from Scott Derrickson, starring Ethan Hawke, which in my opinion, as the years have gone by, I think Ethan Hawke has proven himself to be the most enduring and most important actors of his generation, just in his ability to not only play different roles, but to really choose quality, work with quality filmmakers and do quality stories. So in this one, it's he's playing the villain in it. And it's written by C. Robert Cargill, who actually wrote Sinister, I'm pretty sure. With Scott Derrickson. And look, everything that I've seen Scott Derrickson do so far, I'm a fan of. I was even a fan of Deliver Us from Evil, which is that movie that he did with Eric Bana. I was a fan of that one as well. And that, to me, this is a movie that I'm really looking forward to watching. Supposedly, festival screenings earlier this year was very positive. The trailer looks awesome. That's something I'm looking forward to. What about yourself in 2022? Is any films going to stick out for you?
Well, let me say this. I've loved Ethan Hawke my entire life, ever since what was the first Ethan Hawke movie I saw? I think Gattaca, maybe, because I saw Gattaca in theaters as a little kid. So I love it. I would actually say I remember Sinister being super impressive. Sinister did something I've never seen done, and I will always think of it. After Ethan Hawke figures out what's going on, he sees the tapes. he burns them and goes, let's get the fuck out of the house. And he leaves. And I was like, that's never happened. I mean, of course it still catches up with him, but I remember being like, they finally did it. Because, every movie they stay, there's reasons. He's like, get in the car, we're leaving. And I always think about that. And so I'm excited. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't watched a trailer. Any movie that I really want to see now, I might watch a second, but trailers have gotten more spoilery. Maybe they've always been, but I'm to the point now where I get nervous watching a trailer because I'm like, well, I'm going to see the last scene. I mean, there's a lot of times they show the last scene. So like, I'll turn a trailer off if the movie's good. I didn't watch this because I like Derrickson. I like the writer, the Robert Cargill.
Cargill, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. See Robert Cargill.
And anything Ethan Hawke's in, I'll see. So I'm a giant fan. I'm going to go old school. I'm excited for Evil Dead just because I think the Evil Dead remake was probably the best remake ever made. And I hear this one's going to continue that intensity. It's not going to have Alvarez directing, but I know Sam Raimi's producing and they seem like they're going the same direction. In an odd way, I'm excited about Scream. And I haven't been excited about Scream in years, but I have a feeling this will be hopefully one that kills off Sidney Prescott. And I don't know, I kind of want an ending. What else is coming out this year? Halloween. Okay, we didn't go over it, but I liked Halloween Kills. It's stupid. I know nobody else likes it. I like dumb movies.
I'm in the same camp. I mean, I didn't think it was the greatest film in the world, but I saw where David Gordon Green was going with it. To me, I was looking at that film as kind of like a center film in a trilogy of movies, and I think that center film, that this part 2 of Halloween, this to me was the film more talked about what the effect a serial killer has on the community. That's how I took that film as. It's about the paranoia, it's about the madness, it's about the fear that the community has. And it's one of those films as well that I think hopefully maybe in time people will look back on it and show some more, a little more, appreciation towards what he was doing with it. Like I said, it wasn't the best horror film that I saw, but it's one that I kind of liked. And I remember when I put my review up, some people were getting in touch with me saying, I didn't think you were like that because I didn't like it myself. And I had a bunch of people said that. So I think you're the only one actually that I've talked to that actually had something positive to say about it. I was one of them. Yeah.
I let's just say this. My opinion is I think the themes of it were great. I don't know if they executed them well enough. I'll be fair. And, people are making fun. Red Letter Media had that whole a great episode where it was just evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. It was schlocky. I mean, again, the ideas were there. I don't know if they really did them well. But I like the kind of sequels like this where it's let's murder a bunch of people in cool, gory ways. And I'm going to be this guy. I don't want Michael Myers to be human. If he's human in the first one. If he's human in the sequels, it's lame. For the simple reason that if he's human right now, he's a 69-year-old man. I'm not scared of that. But if he's inhuman, whatever the word is, I find that more threatening. Basically, I subscribe to the very unpopular opinion. Jason Voorhees is a zombie in my mind, and I want Michael Myers, if he's not in the first movie, to be undead, because a 65-year-old man, unless he's doing, even if he's doing push-ups and sit-ups and keeping himself in shape, he's still 65. I could outdo you, dude. Come on. So I don't know. I like that he was unstoppable, and I know people hated that, but I'm like, good. That's what it should be. He's old. I want him to rip through heads and stomp heads and take 4 shots to the chest as he did in the first, or 6, and as he did in the first one. I guess the first one ends saying he's not human, but I don't know. I guess I'm just tangenting now about I don't like that people want a 65-year-old human walking around killing people.
So where Halloween kind of like became this kind of like retroactive kind of like sequel series where after the first one, every other film is kind of like wiped off kind of like the board, and he's like the actual sequels, which is a concept I'm not really a big fan of for many reasons. Next year, we're going to have a same thing with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're going to release a new film, which is supposedly going to be the spiritual sequel to Tobe Hooper's 1974 film.
Hold on. They did that, though. Do you remember? They did that with 3D.
Yeah. I mean, they do it all the time, and I think people forget that. But here we go again. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of all the kind of the horror franchises, that's kind of like the one that I was never really got into. I've seen the first movie a bunch of times. I've seen it a lot of times, and I know I appreciate the filmmaking towards it. And I imagine when watching it back in the 70s, it would have been such a like something else, right? Because Even watching it now,
yeah,
it's that rawness to it, and just the screaming and the film work, etc. But it's never been a franchise that I really kind of went, that's I want to feel like watching Leatherface tonight. It might have to do with kind of the queasy nature of Leatherface himself. I think out of order, kind of like the horror movie villains, he's the one that's kind of like he's very much like the demented inbred step cousin that like lives in the basement of if there was a reality. If there was a reality show where all the movie monsters lived in the same place, Leatherface is a guy that they don't invite to go out for for a bar to drink. They don't tell Leatherface we're going out because he's just he'll just do something really weird. I don't know,
he's not interesting.
No.
He's a one note character. I'm with you, man. I don't care for I love the first one. I grew up on it. The sequel, I kind of go back and forth. I really liked Dennis Hopper. I like that it's kind of goofy, but I'll be honest, I've never really. I kind of feel like this franchise is the one that makes the same movie over and over without having fun.
Right.
I like some dumb sequels. I really, really do, and I usually like them if it just kind of lets loose. Those always try to kind of be serious, and so it's the same movie. This new one coming out, I'm like, we've done it 4 times or 5 times. Who cares? I don't know, and I'm more cynical when it comes to stuff like this because by now. They haven't figured it out. They're not going to figure it out. That is just a character that is not meant to have legs. They're not all going to be Jasons and Freddys and Michael Myers, leprechauns, whatever. Leatherface isn't that guy. So I'm with you, man. I'll see it. I think it's going to come on Netflix, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I'll watch it. Kind of, I'll put it on, but I don't care. Because again, we've done this how many times? That's my big thing. There's nothing special. They failed every other time I've seen them. No other sequel I've really liked. So is this going to be the one? Maybe, but probably not,
It's really interesting kind of this year, how, talk about Quiet Place Part 2 and Conjuring, how sequels are done so well. But I think the cool thing about 2021 is how many original stories came out in regards to horror movies. And I think that has to do with kind of streaming services like Shudder. You can get independent filmmakers to make little films and you can show them out there. And sure enough, there's concepts to films where, you had the whole kind of Fear Street trilogy thing that was on Netflix, which is kind of like, the whole kind of slasher thing. But it was fun. It was a water cooler kind of I don't know if there's water. No one's hanging around water coolers anymore, but it was what
it's a gathering of it. We all talk about it. So it's like an event, TV event.
It is. And I think, it's going to be really interesting to see what 2022 does in regards to the balance between cinema releases, stuff releasing on streaming, because, hopefully, the hope is that, more people as we kind of get this, pandemic kind of I don't know where it's going to go because it's so many twists and turns. It's its own fucking horror movie at this point. But, hopefully 2022, more people can get into cinemas and such and watch horror movies there. But I think I just have a feeling that this is kind of like in the 80s where, horror really thrived kind of like in the video era. I think the streaming era is going to be so good for horror movies, and it has proven to be so in 2021. And it's been really cool to chat with you about horror movies in 2021. And is there any other films that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about today?
Well, let me say this, because I don't know where you stand as much. I'm actually in this weird way, because I grew up at the theaters, I am more excited about streaming because I feel I get to see more. It's not more in terms of quantity, but I just think the freedom of making films is on streaming right now. It's not in theaters. I don't care. Like, I'm the kind of guy that I want same day releases. Sometimes I want to go to the theater, but sometimes I want to be at home. I don't want to go pay $45 to have somebody on their phone in front of me and then have to deal with it. I like horror, at least where I'm from, horror movies are like, in the last 20 years, man, risky thing to see. I've yet to see a horror movie where people didn't laugh or talk. It's just, I remember I almost walked out of Halloween 2018 because people were having a conversation, and I'm glad I got to watch it at my house. Lights off, loud as can be. I guess the only other movie that came out this year that I'm kind of curious in your opinion was Candyman, because that was one that was pushed back like 40 times. And I think it's Nick Acosta. She's the director. Jordan Peele wrote it. Mm-hmm. I, as somebody who's from and around the area of Chicago, I consider the original Candyman one of the best romantic horror movies ever made. What's your view on the new one?
I thought that Nick Acosta did some really good things visually in regards to that film. I thought the look of the film looked great. But at the end of the day, it felt like political messaging posing as a horror movie. That's what it felt like to me. And I think there's a balance to getting stuff like that right. The history of horror movies, a lot of it has been movies that in many ways are political. But the political side of it did not overtake the story of it. The political side comes out organically through the storytelling of it. So people look back at something like Night of the Living Dead, the original one that Romero did in the late 60s, right? And they talked about how such a watershed moment that movie was. But it wasn't a film that when you're watching it was hitting its ideas over your head. It was a film that let you think about it through this process of the storytelling. And I think that's a really kind of clever way to go about it. I think the problem with a lot of kind of what can be branded as activist filmmaking is how you're approaching it. Are you trying to make a film to push a message, or do you have a message that are you trying to produce a film that has a message, or are you trying to push a message in the form of a film? You know what I mean? And it is a balancing act there. And I think the problem with something like Candyman as well is that it seemed like Candyman in this presence of this movie was more of an idea instead of a figure. And what was so cool about that original movie was what Tony Todd did with that character. It was such a sorrowful performance. It was a scary performance as well. You don't really get that in this movie. You know what? I actually compared the new Candyman movie to, and it might seem like a weird comparison, but hear me out. The second Nightmare on Elm Street movie, part 2. So that was a movie.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was a movie where, okay, Freddy is in the film, but he's not necessarily the star of the film. Freddy is played through this young man, right? It's a possession movie. Freddy is trying to get through this guy. So it's like almost like the idea of Freddy in regards to him as a malevolent spirit trying to get through this kid. Okay. And then from that, people can get ideas about who this kid is. Is this a story about his repressed homosexuality? Is it about this? Is it about that? And to me, it's almost kind of like the same thing where Candyman lives through people of trauma, and trauma induces the Candyman to come out. And the first Candyman movie, in many ways, touches on a lot of the subject matter in regards to race, in regards to slavery and all that stuff, and in Chicago and the ghettos and all that stuff. But it did so in a really organic way that kind of just as the movie unfolded, you're getting this message and then you're leaving thinking, I watched a really great horror movie that made me think, as opposed to I watched a political social message film that posed as a horror movie. And I think that was the biggest problem that I had with it.
No, I think you're right. The original had all the same ideas as the remake. It was a smoother transition. The funny thing is, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this was actually, I thought it was better than I expected. I was very nervous. I mean, the ending, though, I think the ending is so clunky. It was, even in my review, I was like, the ending is rough. But the more I thought about it, the more it's like, man, the new one was a little more of a generic slasher. So I kind of, like you said, it was a possession movie, but like they framed it as a slasher. Where I felt like the other one was this just sort of like descent into madness. But I would also argue the Candyman's a good example of somebody that doesn't need sequels. Like, I like the second one, but it's not good. It's one of those, like, I like it more of a schlocky sequel, but if I could wish it away and just have the original, I would. Yeah, I like the lead actor. Yeah, I can't think of his name. I'm so bad at names.
I'll try to look it up. Go ahead.
It's but the guy that played the main character in the new Candyman, I like him. He was in Watchmen. He is the new guy. He's in Morpheus in the new Matrix, which is also rough.
I'm pretty sure he was in Aquaman as well.
I never saw Aquaman. He might be.
I think he plays Black Mantis in Aquaman, but I'm not.
I like him. I want him to. I hope his career blossoms because he's a great actor. I don't know. Candyman is one of those that the more I think about it, the more I'm like, it's a lot more generic than I thought it'd be, and it just doesn't nail home the message that it wants to nail home, in my opinion. I mean, I know a lot of people loved it, so as somebody who likes a lot of things that people don't, I would never fight anybody on it. I'd say love it what you love, but I don't know. I was hoping more.
Yeah, his name is Yahya Abdul Martin II. And yeah, he's a burgeoning star, that's for sure. He was in Aquaman. He's going to be in the Aquaman sequel, Matrix, The Trial of Chicago 7. So he's Watchmen. So he's like one of those. He was in Us as well, which was the other kind of like Jordan Peele movie. So yeah, he's one of those actors that's really kind of like growing in stature and in burgeoning.
And I hope he does. He's good.
Yeah.
There's been a few. I feel like he needs a better agent, because he's in a lot of sequels. A lot of, I guess Aquaman's, he's an Aquaman, so wouldn't mind saying a good agent. But, The Matrix and then Candyman, I'm like, I just want this guy to have his, like, to be in I don't know. I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just, he has the talent. I think he just needs like the perfect role to star, and not a superhero movie. I'm talking, something like his Training Day,
I think
Ethan Hawke.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people thought Candyman would be that, but I think, it just, looking at the box office, 77 million is good coin for like a horror movie, especially like a one that is very much on its face. Like the marketing of the film pretty much said this is a movie with a message, and I don't know whether how people can approach films like that. But, there's a film with interesting ideas. I just thought that the ideas were clunky and kind of like the how they were implemented in the film. And it's such a tricky kind of tightrope to walk to get stuff like that. Yeah.
I think of The Guy in the Wall a lot, where, he's innocent and he's murdered, and it's this like really like dramatic and sad thing, but he's also hiding in the wall, popping out like with his hook hand, trying to give kids candy. I'm like, that's not how you do it. That's, like that's going to scare kids. Like, don't hide in walls, and less kids will run away scared. It's like it's an idea that sounds good on paper, but in execution, it's like, well, yeah, that's not a good way to hide. No. You're not going to survive, man. Not in that atmosphere.
Well, it's been a very interesting 2021, that's for sure. I mean, I'm looking forward, just looking at the list of films 2022 that are coming out. The Black Phone essentially really there, and the Evil Dead, sequel, Scream. What they're going to do with that? Having going back into that franchise, it's going to be interesting. And 2021, I think, has been, it's what I loved about 2021 in regards to horror. It's been a broad choice of movies, and I think the quality of work out there has been really strong. Not everything has been a hit, we talked about that, but, I think there's been so many great independent films of good quality filmmaking as well, both international and in local scenes. And I think it's been really good. And, it's been a pleasure, Lance, to be talking to you about horror movies of 2021. I was saying off air before how much of a fan I am of your work and the stuff. You and I have very similar tastes. So good to talk to you about, horror movies. And hopefully, we could talk again in the future about films. And, I can't wait to see what you do. Can you let the people know where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, of course, my friend. JoeBlow.com. We do a lot of stuff on Arrow in the Head, Joe Blow Horror Originals on YouTube. We run that site. So I do the Black Sheep. I do a lot of editing on that as well. It focuses just more in like the 80s and 90s, and which is usually the eras that I found myself more connected to. And it seems like you do too. Off air, you mentioned your love for Warlock too. And I love Julian Sands with all my life, So but I appreciate it, man. This is always fun. I just like kind of sitting around, BSing about movies, man. It brings me joy.
Absolutely. And Lance Vlcek, I thank you so very much for your time today. And for everyone out there listening, we're going to have more podcasts in a year for wrap up 2021. Thank you for listening. Lance, take care, man.
My friend, I appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.